My name is Daniel Brooks, and the morning I discovered my family had been using my name to cover their business debts, I realized I had been living a lie for years. I was sitting in my small Austin apartment, coffee in hand, scrolling through emails when one subject line made my stomach drop. Final notice business loan default. At first I laughed. I didn't own a business. I didn't owe anyone money, but as I opened the email, my heart sank. The email listed my full legal name, my social security number, and a business address in Ohio I hadn't touched in over a decade. I called the number at the bottom. A calm, professional voice explained that my family-owned construction company had missed 3 consecutive payments and legal action was imminent. Family-owned. My father's voice echoed in my mind. 3 years ago, he had begged me to temporarily use my name to stabilize the business. My mother had smiled over the phone, telling me, "It's your future, too." I trusted them. I signed the papers. Never read the fine print. Never questioned them. I was their son. That trust had been my undoing. And now, years later, that same trust had turned into a ticking financial bomb in my name. I hung up, staring at my laptop screen. My credit score was already dropping. The loan balance was massive, far beyond what I could handle. I called my mother, hoping for some explanation. She answered cheerfully, talking about my father's 60th birthday party that weekend, guest lists, decorations, and flights. I asked calmly, "Why is this loan in my name?" Silence, then a nervous laugh. "You're overthinking it," she said. "We'll explain when you get here." That's when I made my decision. I booked a flight to Ohio not to argue, not to plead, but to listen and to witness. They thought I was flying in for a birthday celebration. What they didn't know was that I was bringing every truth I had documented. Over the years, I knew the moment I stepped through that door, nothing would be the same. This wasn't about money. It was about respect, boundaries, and finally taking control of my life. The flight felt endless. I replayed every memory of helping them silently, wiring money for overdue bills, bailing out failed credit card debt, sending funds for emergency repairs all without a thank you. I remembered the texts, the screenshots, the little "honey, we'll pay you back" promises that never came. Every favor had been a chain, and every chain had tightened without me realizing. Landing in Ohio, I didn't feel like returning home. I felt like an investigator stepping into a crime scene I had unknowingly participated in. My heart pounded as I rang the doorbell. When my father opened it, smiling as if nothing had happened, I set my suitcase down and looked him straight in the eyes. I wasn't the same trusting son who had signed papers years ago. I was someone ready to show them exactly what years of silent exploitation looked like. They thought I came home for a birthday party. What they didn't realize was that by the time the candles were blown out, their entire family vacation, their business secrets, and their carefully constructed image would be under my control. I stepped into the living room, and the first thing I noticed was how perfectly normal everything looked. Birthday balloons, a cake on the counter, laughter echoing from the kitchen. But beneath the surface, I knew the truth. I wasn't here for cake or hugs. I was here to show my family that years of exploiting my trust had consequences. My father waved at me, smiling, oblivious. My mother handed me a glass of water, still acting as if everything was ordinary. I sat down at the table, pulled out my laptop, and opened a folder I had named Brooks Family Accounts. Every wire transfer, every emergency payment, every business bailout was documented. Each line had dates, amounts, and screenshots. I could see my mother stiffen, my father's smile falter. I started speaking slowly, carefully, so they couldn't interrupt. "Let's go through this," I said, clicking on the first spreadsheet. And in that moment, I realized just how blind they had been. They had no idea the scale of what I had quietly handled for them. Line after line, I showed them the truth. March 2019, $2,800 wired for overdue materials. June 2020, $2,500 to cover failed equipment rentals. November 2021, $900 for emergency repairs. March 2022, $200 for payroll my father had promised to cover. Every single entry highlighted in bright colors, impossible to ignore. My mother's hand flew to her mouth as she recognized her own texts, pleading screenshots next to each payment. My father's jaw tightened as he realized I had been covering the business loans they had put in my name without telling me. I watched as my siblings, who had been lounging on the couch, looked up in disbelief. My brother Jake muttered, "This can't be real." But it was. Every figure, every transaction meticulously documented. I had spent weeks preparing this, making sure there was no ambiguity, no chance for them to manipulate the story. I could see the fear slowly replace their arrogance. The laughter, the casual jokes, the assumption that I was the family's endless resource all, fading as reality sank in. Then I brought out the legal agreement I had drafted with my financial advisor. It wasn't a lawsuit. It wasn't me threatening them. It was simple. Acknowledgement of debt and a plan for repayment, however small. Even $50 a month would begin to teach them responsibility. The look on my father's face was priceless shock. Anger, disbelief all wrapped into one. My mother's whispered protests. No, this isn't fair. Couldn't mask the truth staring back at her. I was done being the family's ATM. Done being their safety net. Done being invisible except when money was involved. As I walked them through the spreadsheet, their carefully constructed world began to crumble. The resort bookings for their family getaway sat in bold letters, ready for departure. But when I revealed that all reservations had been canceled using the same card I had been footing the bill with, silence fell. My father's face went pale. My mother froze mid-step, and my siblings gaped. The dream vacation they had assumed was guaranteed was now gone just like that. And just when they thought it couldn't get any worse, I leaned back in my chair and said, "This isn't just about the resort. It's about every year you treated me like I was here only for your benefit. And this is the first day of the consequences." The room was dead silent. My father's hand twitched near the resort brochure, as if he could physically pull it back into existence. My mother's eyes were wide, her lips trembling as she whispered, "Claire, what have you done?" My siblings leaned forward, faces pale, realizing that the fantasy they had built on my back had just collapsed. And in that silence, I felt something shift inside me. A weight lifted. For the first time in years, I wasn't scared of their anger. I wasn't pleading. I was finally standing in my own power. I closed the laptop slightly and let them breathe. "Before anyone says a word," I began calmly, "I want you to see what I've been doing all these years. Not because I wanted recognition, but because I had to keep things from falling apart." I scrolled slowly, highlighting months of payments, bills, and transfers. Every time a bill was late, every time the water heater broke, every time Dad or Jake needed just a little help, I was the one who stepped in. And now, I'm stepping back. The moment I said that, I could see the panic in their eyes. They realized they had counted on me for everything. And now, for the first time, I wasn't available. Jake, my brother, tried to interject. "Claire, you can't do this." Will, I held up a hand. "No, Jake, I can. And I will, because every favor, every dollar, every emergency you threw my way came with a cost. A cost I've been paying in silence for years." My mother's face turned red. "Claire, honey, we didn't—" "No," I interrupted, voice steady. "You did. And now, the consequences are here." I tapped on a new folder labeled co-borrower documents and pulled up an email from the bank. Both our names, mine and my parents', were on the mortgage. "Do you understand what this means?" I asked softly, almost like I was talking to strangers. Every missed payment, every shortfall, every late notice, my credit was affected. And I had no say in it. Until now, my father froze. My mother's hands shook. "Claire, that's impossible," she whispered. "It's very possible," I said. "And very real. That's why your vacation is canceled. And why I'm no longer your built-in bank or babysitter." The kids who had been running around paused and stared at me. For a moment, I saw a flicker of understanding in their little faces, like they finally noticed that the grown-ups weren't invincible, and that I wasn't just the background character in their lives. And in that moment, I knew they finally understood. "You can't manipulate me with guilt or rely on me to fix everything anymore." I leaned forward, scrolling to the final line of the spreadsheet, the total sum of money I had quietly covered for them over the past 3 years, $62,400. The number glared back at them, undeniable. My mother gasped. No way." My father's knuckles turned white as he gripped the table. Jake's voice cracked. "Claire, I swear we'll pay you back." I shook my head. "No, that's not the point. The point is that I'm done being your solution. From now on, you handle your own mess." I leaned back and smiled slightly, letting the weight of my words sink in. "If you think you can guilt me into helping again, remember this: every transaction, every receipt, every payment is documented. And I'm not here to fight. I'm here to make sure we all start living in reality." The color drained from their faces as the truth hit them like a cold wave. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't just ending their vacation, I was reclaiming my life. After I closed my laptop, the house felt smaller. tighter, as if the walls themselves were holding their collective shock. My suitcase, heavy with gifts for the kids I wasn't going to babysit anymore, sat in the corner like a silent witness to everything. The room smelled faintly of coffee and vacation brochures, but the tension was thick enough to choke on. My parents looked at each other, silently asking questions they didn't dare voice. Jake fidgeted, his ego bruised, realizing for the first time that I was no longer a safety net dangling quietly in the background. I took a slow breath and let it out. "We need to talk about what happens next," I said calmly. "Because for years I've been covering for you. For years I've been keeping the household afloat, paying for things you've treated as optional, while pretending it wasn't a big deal. Well, it is, and it stops now." I saw their eyes widen as they realized this wasn't a bluff. This wasn't another temporary lecture. This was me setting boundaries and finally meaning it. I stood and walked to the counter where the resort brochure lay. I tapped the bright photos, smiling families on pristine beaches, luxury flights, and a vacation that was no longer going to happen. All of this, I said, letting my finger linger over the page, was supposed to be paid for by me, with my money, from my job, from my sacrifices. And you assumed it would always be that way. Well, it won't. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. "Claire, please. We didn't mean," I cut her off. "It doesn't matter. The point isn't intention. The point is action, and your action has always relied on me." I clicked to another tab this time, a folder labeled Receipts and Transfers. Every single transaction I had ever made for them, for emergencies, for vacations, for bills they forgot, was neatly organized, dated and color-coded. The numbers glared at them. Undeniable proof of a decade of silent labor disguised as family duty. Jake leaned back in his chair, panic rising. "Claire, seriously, can we work this out?" "You don't have to." I held up a hand, stern and unwavering. "No, we are working this out, but not on your terms. This is the first time in years you're seeing reality, and it's uncomfortable. That's the point." I could see it in their faces the first time in forever that they weren't laughing at me, making jokes, pretending I was the villain. Now, they were staring at the consequences of their choices. I continued, scrolling to the email from the bank, showing both our names on the mortgage. "Do you know what this means?" I asked softly. "That every late payment, every missed bill, every shortfall I covered has been affecting me directly. My credit, my future. And yet you called me, crying, pretending I was gone and needed to save Christmas. No, I've been saving Christmas for years. But this one is mine." My mother's eyes filled with tears, and for a moment I thought she might try to argue, but she didn't. The color drained from Jake's face. My father's jaw tightened, knuckles white against the table. You can't do this," he muttered. "Yes, I can," I said, my voice calm but firm. "And I am. Every automatic payment stops today. Every shared account closes. From now on, you will pay your own bills. You will handle your own emergencies. And if anyone thinks I'm being cruel, just look at the facts." I paused, letting the weight of my words settle over them like a heavy fog. "I'm not here to punish you," I said softly. "I'm here to reclaim my life, and if that means you finally understand what it's like when I'm gone, so be it." End rehook. The silence was deafening. Their vacation was gone. Their control was gone. And I finally was free. The morning sunlight spilled across the kitchen counter, catching the glossy resort brochure that now felt like a relic from a past I had never agreed to. I sipped my coffee, savoring the silence, the first real silence I'd had in years. Jake was slouched in his chair, scrolling through his phone, probably reading the shocked reactions of relatives and friends on social media. My parents were still processing the spreadsheet, the receipts, the legal documentation that made it impossible to argue. I walked over to the living room and tapped on my laptop. The confirmation emails, the flight credits, the canceled resort package, they were all there. Everything that was supposed to make their perfect family vacation happen was now neutralized. I wasn't angry. I was precise. And for the first time, I felt a strange satisfaction knowing that my boundaries were finally being respected, even if they didn't fully understand it yet. And that's when I realized they weren't just shocked. They were scared. Scared because for years, they had relied on me as a financial lifeline, a built-in nanny, a silent savior, and now that safety net was gone. My mother spoke first, her voice trembling. "Claire, this is too much. We didn't realize, but I didn't let her finish." "No," I said firmly. "You did realize. Every time I transferred money, every time I covered a bill, every time I booked something you couldn't afford, you knew. You just didn't care. You assumed I always would. That ends now." Jake finally looked up from his phone, his usual smirk gone. "Claire, you're really serious?" he asked, disbelief and fear tangled in his tone. "This isn't just a stunt?" I shook my head. "No stunt, reality, for the first time. You're going to see what it's like without me, and maybe, just maybe, you'll finally understand the cost of taking me for granted." I could feel the weight of their shock hitting them like a physical force. It was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment when they realized that I wasn't invisible. I wasn't their free babysitter, their personal bank, or their secret rescue plan. As they sat in stunned silence, I opened another tab showing all the streaming services, Uber Eats accounts, grocery deliveries, and shared subscriptions that I had been funding. I clicked cancel on each one, watching as confirmation emails pinged into my inbox. The Disney Plus account went first, then Hulu, Spotify, Walmart, plus everything that had quietly tethered me to their lives was now severed. My father, usually the stoic one, finally muttered, "You can't just take everything away like this. This is cruel." "No, Dad," I said calmly, meeting his eyes. "This is necessary. You've been living in a fantasy funded by me, pretending you can't manage without my money. Now you will see what it's like to manage without me. And if you want to blame me, go ahead, but remember the facts." And then it hit me. I wasn't just reclaiming my money. I was reclaiming my life, my peace, my sanity. For years, I had let them decide my worth, measure me by my bank account and my willingness to sacrifice. Not anymore. By the time I packed my laptop and checked the canceled reservations one last time, the room had shifted. The laughter, the mocking, the entitlement, it was gone. In its place was quiet, heavy, uncomfortable, but real. My family had a choice now: adapt, learn, and take responsibility, or continue living in a fantasy that had been funded by me for far too long. I stood, suitcase in hand, feeling a sense of calm I hadn't known in years. "I'm done," I said, voice steady. "This is my life, my money, my future. And if you can't respect that, then maybe it's time you figured it out without me." The house was silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioner. Their perfect vacation was gone. Their control was gone. And I, for the first time in my life, I was free. The silence in the Miller house hung heavy, almost suffocating. My suitcase was by the door, my laptop closed, and yet the tension was far from over. I could feel it radiating from every corner: my parents, Jake, even the kids, who now stared at me with a mix of confusion and curiosity. The air was thick with disbelief. For years, they had assumed I would silently handle their mess, and now that assumption was gone. I walked to the dining room and sat down, motioning for everyone to follow. "We need to talk," I said, my tone calm but firm. "Not about the vacation, not about the house, but about accountability. About the reality of what's been happening for years." And that's when I saw it, the first crack in the armor. My mother's eyes, usually sharp and commanding, were clouded with doubt. Jake's usual arrogance had vanished, replaced by unease. They finally realized this wasn't just a moment of frustration. This was a turning point. I opened my laptop again and pulled up a detailed spreadsheet. Color-coded, labeled, every entry meticulously documented. "This isn't personal," I said, scrolling slowly so they could see. "This is facts. Every transfer, every bill, every emergency I covered for you, it's all here. Let's start with March of last year." My father leaned forward, squinting. "Claire, do you really expect us to pay for all this now?" "No," I said, shaking my head. "I don't expect instant repayment. I expect acknowledgement. I expect honesty. And I expect you to stop pretending you can't manage without me." The tension escalated as I clicked through the receipts, the PayPal transfers, the bank statements showing I had been covering mortgage shortfalls, utilities, groceries, streaming services. Every line was a reminder of how much I had given silently and how little recognition I had ever received. Jake shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "So, you're saying we've been taking you for granted?" he muttered, almost in disbelief. "Yes," I said firmly. "For years. And it stops today. If you want to have a vacation, pay for it yourselves. If you want to run this household, do it without me footing the bill. I'm done being invisible. Done being the free solution to your mistakes." I could see their faces blanch, their pride bruised, their entitlement rattled. My mother whispered, "Claire, please, this is too much." Rehook. But I wasn't done. I opened another tab showing the joint accounts, the automatic payments I had set up over the years. I clicked through, confirming cancellations. Electricity, water, grocery delivery, every single service tied to me. Every confirmation email was a small, quiet victory. Their perfect delusion was unraveling, and the impact was immediate. My father finally erupted. "You can't just do this. You're making us look like failures." I met his gaze, unwavering. "You've been living on my labor, my money, my time. I'm not making you look like failures, I'm showing the truth. The truth you've avoided for years." The room went silent again. No laughter, no smirks, no deflections. Only the stark reality of accountability. And as I stood, suitcase in hand, ready to leave, I realized something powerful. I wasn't just reclaiming my finances. I was reclaiming my life, and nothing they could say or do would take that away. The room was frozen. My suitcase by the door, my laptop open to the spreadsheet that laid bare 3 years of silent labor, and my parents staring at me like I'd just rewritten the rules of reality. I could almost hear their thoughts. How dare she? How could she expose us like this? I took a deep breath. "This isn't about revenge," I said, my voice calm but carrying weight. "It's about clarity, about boundaries, about finally being honest with ourselves. You've treated me like a free bank, a built-in nanny, a quiet solution to all your problems. That ends now." And that's when the first tears appeared, my mother's, but not of anger. They were quiet, almost ashamed, as she realized the extent of what she had relied on me for. For the first time, she saw herself through my eyes, and the illusion of control she had clung to for years started to crumble. Jake finally spoke, voice trembling. "Claire, this is a lot. I didn't realize. You didn't realize because you never looked." I interrupted, clicking to the next tab, showing the canceled reservations. For their dream vacation. Every flight, every resort booking, every brunch, every payment paid by me. And now, there's no vacation. Not without effort. Not without accountability. Not without facing the truth. My father's face flushed red. "You can't do this. Our reputation, our family, how will people see us?" I looked him dead in the eye. "They will see the truth. You lived on my labor, my money, my time. You will no longer spin a story about being victims while I carry the cost. I am done being your invisible solution." The kids stared, confused, as if a veil had lifted. No more being used as props in a story where I was the silent caretaker. Even Mia whispered, "Mom, Dad, is this really how it's been?" Their young voices cut through the tension like a blade, forcing everyone to confront the reality of years built on my sacrifices. I stood, suitcase in hand, ready to leave. From this moment on, I said, "I'm not part of your automatic safety net. Your bills, your vacations, your mistakes, handle them yourselves. I'm no longer your unpaid banker or nanny. I'm Claire Miller, not a credit card with legs." My mother's shoulders slumped. My father stared at the floor, and Jake quietly nodded, as if finally understanding what it meant to face consequences. I walked out the door, the California sun hitting my face, suitcase rolling behind me. For the first time in years, I felt weight lift off my chest. I wasn't running away, I was stepping into my life. The emails, the receipts, the legal advice, all of it had been preparation for this moment. And as the door closed behind me, I realized the true lesson. Boundaries aren't cruel. They're the only path to freedom. Stepped into my tiny San Diego condo, suitcase in hand, and finally exhaled. No one was waiting with complaints. No one needed me to fix their chaos. No one expected me to silently sacrifice anymore. The apartment smelled of fresh paint and new carpet mine. For the first time in years, every corner of this space belonged to me, not a family who had treated me like an ATM. I brewed a cup of cheap grocery store coffee, curled up cross-legged on the floor, and opened my laptop. The emails had started rolling in. Confirmations from the bank, utility companies, and streaming services. Everything I had been paying for that wasn't mine anymore had been officially canceled. Every transfer, every payment, every emergency request, they were gone. I felt a strange sense of calm. The life I had been trapped in, where I was invisible except as a source of money, had finally ended. But freedom wasn't just about bills. It was about self-respect, about finally showing my family what happens when boundaries are drawn and consequences are faced. A week later, I saw a post online from my father. He tried to spin it. Our daughter flew in from London and abandoned us for money. I stared at it and smiled. They were still trying to rewrite reality, but this time, I had the receipts, the evidence, and my own life untouched by their lies. A few days later, my mother knocked on my door. She looked smaller somehow, no makeup, no perfect hair, just a tired woman carrying a reusable grocery bag like a shield. I let her in, heart steady. She handed me a small check. Not for the full amount I'd paid over the years. But it wasn't about the money anymore. It was about acknowledgement. Finally, she admitted quietly that she had treated me like a resource, not a daughter. I sat with her, not angry, Not vindictive, just present. I'm not asking for your forgiveness, I said. I'm asking for honesty. A life where I am not your safety net, where my value isn't measured in dollars. She nodded, tears streaming quietly, realizing for the first time that love and respect aren't about control or debt. They're about recognition and fairness. And as she left, hugging me properly this time, I realized something profound. Freedom isn't about cutting ties completely. It's about reclaiming your space, your time, and your worth. My parents, my brother, even the kids, they would adjust. But me, I was finally free. For the first Christmas in years, I didn't feel obligated to anyone else. No flights, no babysitting, no secret payments, just me, my tiny condo, and the peace I had earned the hard way. And that, I realized, was the greatest gift of all.